Hello everyone, this is Brendan Strains here, and today we're going to be doing a review on one of the two new engines I recently purchased from the Spokane Model Train Show this year, and that is the Lionel Lionmaster TMCC Pennsylvania Railroad T1 number 5514. Before we talk about Lionel's model, let's talk about the real Pennsylvania Railroad T1. So the T1 was a 4444 steam locomotive. In case if you don't know what 444 means, it means for the wheel configuration on the engine. This means we have 4 wheels up here on the lead truck, 4 drive wheels here, another 4 drive wheels here, and 4 wheels underneath the cab and firebox for support. The T1 was a class of 52 duplex steam locomotives built by both the Pennsylvania Railroad and Baldwin between 1942 and 1946. The first two prototypes, which were numbered 6110 and 6111, were built by Baldwin in 1942, and then 50 production units numbered 5500 to 5549, which were built by both Baldwin and the Juniata shops between 1945 and 1946. These engines were built to replace the Pennsylvania Railroad's aging K4S Pacifics. However, the T1s would have some flaws that plagued them. The first issue was that the engines were known to have violent wheel slippage at starts and at speeds. This was due to the engine not having the best spring equalization and the fact that the crews didn't have enough time to get used to the engines. The engines had so much boiler pressure that at any throttle setting, they would want to start quickly, which would cause the engine to start slipping its drivers. These engines would also be very expensive to maintain and operate, despite them being very modern for their time. Despite the flaws, the T1s performed very well on the Pennsylvania, often going at speeds of over 110 miles an hour quite easily. Now, I'm pretty sure all of you guys are asking, what is a duplex? Well, a duplex is when a locomotive has 2 sets of drivers. However, unlike an articulated engine, which would have 1 set of drivers attached to the frame and the front set would articulate, on a duplex, both sets of drivers are fixed to the frame. However, like all duplexes, the T1s didn't last long in service. They may have been an interesting idea and had a lot of potential to be a great steam engine, but they came in too late because everyone knew the diesels were on the way. Hence, he would take them off of the main passenger trains by 1949 and retired them completely between 1951 and 1952, with most of them being less than 10 years old. By 1956, the last T1 would be cut up for scrap, making them officially extinct. That is, until 2014, when a new group called the T1 Trust decided to build a brand new T1 from the rails up. The new T1, which is to be numbered 5550, is expecting to be completed by 2030. Now that you know the history on the Pennsylvania T1, let's talk about this model here. Now, this engine was made around 2003 and was shown in the 2003 Volume 2 catalog, and they just made this version of the T1, but they also released a Big Boy, a Hudson, I believe, in the Lionmaster line, and a couple Challengers and an A-Class. Now, this doesn't mean this was the only T1 that Lionel made. They made a scale Pennsy T1 2 years before this one, and 7 or 8 years later after they released this Lionmaster T1, they would re-release it again, but with Legacy and Whistle Steam. Now, like I said, this is a Lionmaster engine, but what does Lionmaster mean? Well, Lionmaster means that this engine is shrunk down to handle the tighter curves on smaller layouts. They do this by making the drawbar gap bigger, and they make these driver sets here articulate. Now, on the real T1, these never articulated, but they did it on this model to handle curves up to 0.31. The combined length of the engine and the tender is around 27 inches. It's maybe around 28 inches if you count the couplers, and the minimum curve to operate this engine is 031. There is 3 ways to operate this engine. You can either run this with the Lionel Legacy Command System or the Lionel TMCC remote, as that will give you access to all the engine's advanced features, or you can run it conventionally with just a transformer and some track. This engine has some pretty good details, so let's go ahead and take a closer look. Here's a look on the front of the engine. We have some nice grille detailing right here. Then in the middle we have an operational ditch light. Right above it we have the separately applied keystone number plate that was seen on all Pennsylvania steam engines that were used for passenger service. Then on either side of the number plate we have the beginning of the 2 separately applied metal handrails that go all the way back to the cab. On top here we have an operational headlight, and then on either side of the engine we have operational number boards and marker lights that both light up on either side. Here's a look on the sides of the engine. Now there's not a lot to see on the sides of the engine because this is a streamlined locomotive and you're not going to get a lot of separately applied detailing. But the details we do have is we have the continuation of the separately applied metal handrail that goes all the way back to the cab. We have a separately applied brass bell right here that's underneath the pilot. Then we have legible builder's plates on either side. Then we have the drive wheels and the drive rods, and all this stuff looks amazing. I absolutely love the rods on this engine. Then above the wheels we have some nice rivet detailing and some nice molded-in detailing alongside the boiler and the running board. Towards the rear of the engine we have the trailing truck right here, which is underneath the firebox. Now the firebox does not have any separately applied detailing, but we do have some nice molded in rivets and piping and such. Then above it we have some separately applied builder's plates on the other side of the engine. Now I don't know why they added builder's plates here as well. Then towards the cab rear we have some nice molded in steps that go up to the door, which does not open. On either side of the door we have some molded in grab irons on either side. We have the crisp 5514 along either side of the cab. We have clear plastic inserts in the windows. And inside the cab there are 2 hand-painted crew figures. There's a modestly detailed back head, but you have to remember this engine was made in 2003, so this is before when we start to get hand-painted valves and gauges and such in these engines. And there inside the cab there is a operational firebox below. On top of the engine we have some nice molded in detailing right here. Then we have the smokestack, and there is a fan-driven smoke unit down in there. And to load smoke fluid in the smoke unit, you simply pour the smoke fluid directly down the stack. Behind the smokestack we have some molded in sand filler caps. There's a total of 4 of them, 2 on either side. Then behind that we have a molded in steam dome in the middle. Right next to it we have a separately applied brass whistle. Then behind the whistle we have a little separately applied red valve here, which is a cool little detail they added to the engine. Then in the streamlined casing behind the whistle there's 3 brass pop-off valves. Then if you look towards the rear of the cab we have some rivet detailing, and then on top of the cab there is a vent, but unfortunately the vent does not open. Here's a look on the inside of the cab, and like I said earlier, the cab is modestly detailed, but we do have our 2 figures on either side. Then on the bottom here we have the place where the automatic stoker would be. So what the automatic stoker is that there's a pipe that would connect to the engine and the tender, and all the fireman would have to do is pull a lever or push a button, and then the little conveyor would bring the coal from the tender to the engine's firebox. Okay, that takes care of the engine. Now let's go ahead and check out the tender. Now, since, like I said earlier, this is a streamlined engine, and that includes the tender as well, so you're not going to be getting a lot of rivet detailing alongside the tender. It's completely smooth. But on the sides of the tender, we do have the Pennsylvania Herald up top. We have a nice crisp Pennsylvania along either side of the tender with the gold lining, which I think really makes this engine stand out. And right here we have some nice molded in door detailing. Here's the front of the tender. We have the receiving socket for the wireless drawbar. Then above it we have the other part of the automatic stoker. Then above that we have some nice molded in door detailing. On top of the tender we have a metal coal load right here. Then behind it we have some nice separately applied details here. Here's the back of the tender. We have a nice molded in ladder. Then right below it we have some builder's plates on the tender right here that are legible. Then on either side of the tender we have some separately applied grab irons on either side. We have some nice marker lights that do light up. We have an operational backup light right there. And in the middle, we have an electrocoupler that can be fired from the Legacy or the TMCC remote. Alright, the last thing we are going to do before we start this engine up is to mention my favorite feature on this engine. My favorite feature of the T1 is actually the streamlining on this engine. The streamlining on this engine makes this locomotive look unlike any other engine in my collection. And when you have a collection as large as mine, it's always good to have something different. And when you see this running earlier, I think you'll agree that this thing looks unlike anything else in my collection. So yeah, my favorite feature for the engine is the streamlining. Alright, let's go ahead and start this engine up. So these are the background / idle sounds. Let's start off by listening to the bell. Here is the whistle. Now, since this engine doesn't have Legacy, you don't have the quillable whistle, but you do have what's called the multi-whistle effect, and what that does is that the whistle plays at random, so you'll occasionally get different intensities of the whistle. See, there we go, it just did it right there. Now here's the blowdown sound. The blowdown sound is done by clicking on your TMCC remote, the 3 button. But yeah, you just press the 3 button and it activates the blowdown sound. Now, unfortunately, since this is not a Legacy engine, you can't just hold down the 3 button for it to continue the blowdown sound effect. You just press it once and it just does a short burst of it. Then here's some of the crew talk. Alright, let's go ahead and connect this thing up to some cars. Alright, let's go ahead and move her on out. Okay, that wraps it up for this review. This is a great locomotive. I'm happy to own it, and it's a lot of fun to run. Now, if you're interested in purchasing one of these, they occasionally pop up on eBay every now and then, but these engines are kind of more harder to find, because Lionel only made this duplex in the Lionmaster form twice, and they only made the scale form once. But if you want an estimate of how much these would be going for, I got mine for $700, and you can probably get yours for around that price or even a little bit higher. Now, this is an engine I really recommend you guys getting because it's something a little bit different, and this engine is perfect for small layouts, so you can have a big engine like this, but you can run it on a small layout, which is, in my opinion, a win-win. Well, that does it for this video. This is Brendan's Trains, signing off.